What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Crimson Connective, where today we're discussing the Utah-Florida opener with Anthony Beck from Swamp Inside Florida. Anthony, thanks for taking some time with us out of this short and crazy week. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Doing good. Obviously, week one, so things are a bit crazy, but it's best time of year in my opinion. How are things going in Florida for you guys?
Going pretty well. I mean, as you guys probably saw earlier, the team kind of altered their travel plans. So, due to the hurricane. So we're really everybody in Florida is kind of just preparing for that because looks like it might be a major hurricane by landfall. So they're gonna travel in. They're gonna travel tomorrow, head out to Dallas, stay the night in Dallas, and then fly in on Wednesday into Salt Lake City. So it's still hurricane season down here, and it's pretty much at the peak. So just really keeping an eye on that and just making sure the team gets in
Mhm.
safely.
Yeah. We wish the best for the team traveling. You know, Utah had some issues last year after the game. You know, returning to Salt Lake, they had some plane issues that delayed them quite a while. But yeah, we hope the best for the team. Obviously, hopefully they can arrive here safely in Salt Lake City for the home opener on Thursday, which should be a fantastic matchup. And Anthony, let's just jump right in. So you know, a solid list of questions here for you, but first off, what's the general feeling on the Gators program heading into the opener?
Well, I think everybody is a little more upbeat now than they were, let's say, in the spring. With what we're hearing coming out of camp, some of the guys that are, kind of starting to separate themselves. We know Graham Mertz is going to be the starter. We know who Florida has at running back with Montreal Johnson, and Trevor Etienne. Still get those confused for some reason, but we know who they have. But it's just hearing some of the guys, like transfers like Cam Jackson along the defensive line, guys like Caleb Banks. We still have Chris McClellan, who's returning for his second year. So everybody's kind of just starting to separate themselves. We're starting to know who everyone is and who's going to make an impact. And, had two unfortunate injuries. Let's start with on the offensive side of the ball. Tulane running back transfer Cam Carroll out for the season, had a lower body injury. I think it was a knee injury. He'll be out for the season. He was expected to back up the aforementioned Etienne and Johnson. And then on the defense side of the ball, Justice Boone tore his ACL, so he'll be out for the season. But the one thing that I've looked at with this team is they have more depth now. So they're gonna go with the plethora of guys, along the defensive line, along the edge spot where Boone was playing. And for the running back position, you may see freshman Trayon Webb out of Jacksonville get some more burn. So it's just an interesting time, but there is more positive right now with the team. They look like everyone's ready to go. I mean, fall camps ended, they're ready to hit someone else. So it should be a fantastic game going into Thursday night.
Yeah, I mean it's obviously a much different Florida team than a year ago. You know, a big change at quarterback. You lose a guy like Anthony Richardson to the NFL. Some changes across that offensive line, as you mentioned. There's the depth is having to probably step up a bit for the Gators, but you know some consistency here over for Dan Mullen.
I'm sorry, I didn't get it. What'd you say?
No, you're good. You're good. So heading into a year two of Billy Napier, was he the right choice to take over for Dan Mullen?
I believe he was. Even though he's young as a coach, I know we've seen him do as a recruiter. So that was always a positive. That was one thing that we at the University of Florida harp on: recruit the best of the best and build a championship roster. That's something that he's known for doing. But also, we can see him as a coach. He's maturing every single year. His first year in Louisiana, team wasn't really that great. Then the second year, that's when the turnaround happened. He started getting more of his guys in, implementing his system, and they had a lot of success. And for him to get the Florida job is sort of the same thing. He inherited a roster that wasn't really all that great. There was some talent. Don't get me wrong, there was some talent, but there were holes in different parts of the roster, and it showed last season. If you look at even in the Utah game last year to open up the season, there were holes that were shown there was depth issues, and guys that were maybe on campus that maybe probably shouldn't have been on campus, but he's starting to get more of his guys, and he's starting to build more depth. He's utilized the portal really well, and as we see right now, recruiting at the high school level, he's starting to really pick it up there. So I feel like, yes, he was definitely the right choice for the University of Florida, and everyone's just excited to see where he goes this season, the kind of jump that they make.
Yeah, I mean, the first year is always difficult for any coach. That making that transition, coming into a new program, is always difficult. So year two should definitely, hopefully, be a step up for Napier as he, kind of gets his footing under himself. He gets some recruits in the program, some guys in the transfer portal that he oversaw. So it'll be interesting. Obviously, it's been a year since Utah and Florida played. Just a second meeting between the two programs, but are there any key takeaways from last year's matchup that you can see Florida focusing on heading into Thursday's game?
One of the main focuses, one of the main parts I'm looking at for them to focus on would be really, honestly, stopping the run. That was something that they struggled with in the game last year, and also covering the tight ends. Dalton Kincaid last year had a big game for Utah, and Cam Rising, being able to utilize his legs using the quarterback run, they weren't able to really stop him on the ground all night long. But also just the running backs, they all played really, really well. What was his name? I think his name was Tavion Thomas last year for Utah. Ran the ball pretty well last season, and they were able to kind of milk the clock. So being able to get off the field on third down is something that they're focusing on, stopping the run, and just being better in coverage, covering the tight ends, because Utah is a very, very, very physical team. Honestly, if you want my honest opinion, they're built like an SEC team. They're one of the only teams in the Pac-12 that could literally come into the SEC and hold their own, because that's how they're built. So we know they're going to be physical, and Florida just has to match that physicality. And like I said, they put an emphasis on stopping the run, really for the most part there. I think they can find some success out there.
Yeah, no, I think you hit every single point that Florida should be focusing on. Utah has made part of their identity is to be physical, and obviously a great compliment coming from you that they are built like an SEC team. I'd have to agree, especially over the last few years as their recruiting has definitely gone to the next level. They've been able to go out and get guys that are physical. And they're going to bring the heat on both ends of the ball, and then as well the running game. Utah has been known to run the football for a long time, and just like last year, that's probably going to be a focal point of this offense moving in. And so for sure, that's something that Florida should be focused on heading into Thursday's game. So transitioning a little bit, so if you Anthony, if you can give me a quick breakdown of the 2023 Gators, both individuals and the team as a whole. I mean, like I said earlier, this is a much different Florida team than Utah faced a year ago.
Yeah, well, definitely. You're going to definitely get a different style of quarterback transition from Anthony Richardson to Graham Mertz. Anthony Richardson, we know about the physical tools he had, his ability as a runner. Bringing that element to the table last year was very, very different than what you're going to see from Graham Mertz. He's more of a pocket passer, even though he moves pretty well in the pocket and moves better than a lot of people think. So transitioning to him, it's been pretty seamless, actually, if you think about it. And if you remember, he was one of the most highly sought out recruits in the country coming out of high school. So we know he has the talent. Florida brings back, as I said before, Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne at the running back position, but they also added Cam Carroll, even though he's out for the season, freshman Trayon Webb, and a JUCO transfer and Jacoby Jackson, who we may or may not see this season, but they've added depth to the running back room, and along the offensive line, they've added Baylor transfer Micah Mazuka to play left guard. They bring back Austin Barber, who's going to start at left tackle. They brought in Alabama transfer Damian George at right tackle. And Richie Leonard's going to be, I believe, the right guard. And they bring back Kingsley Equakin. So they really bring back two starters from last year's roster, but from last year's offensive line. But the offensive line looks like they're going to be pretty decent this year. And defensively, like I mentioned before, they've added Cam Jackson from Memphis and Caleb Banks from Louisville. So there's more depth along the defensive line. Bringing back Desmond Watson, who's going to be a junior this year, and Chris McClellan, who's going to be a sophomore. They're going to be able to rotate a lot of guys, even though they lose Gervon Dexter, senior, who was a second-round pick of the Chicago Bears. They're going to be able to rotate more guys and build more depth and have more fresh guys in this season than they did last year. From a linebacker standpoint, they add Taraja Mitchell, the Ohio State transfer. They've also added Houston transfer Manny Nunnery and Michigan transfer Deuce Spurlock to a group that brings back Shamar James, who's going to be a sophomore, Derek Wingo, and Scooby Williams. So, again, more depth along the linebacker position. And, in the secondary, that's where there's a little bit of concern at safety, even though I like R.J. Moten, the Michigan transfer, and they also bring back Amari Wilson, who's a former five-star recruit. But they also added along the safeties Jordan Castell, who's a true freshman from the Orlando area. You may see a lot of him in game one. He's been one of the guys that's been the talk of camp. And along the cornerback position, they bring back Jason Marshall, who's going to be a junior this year, is more than likely his last year on campus. They bring back sophomore Devin Moore. And this is the interesting thing about Devin Moore. Apparently, he grew. So he's around 6'3", 6'4" now. So playing corner, that's crazy to think about. But he's coming back for his sophomore year. Jalen Kimber also returns, former Georgia transfer. And I'm looking at two freshmen in the two deep, Jakeem Jackson and Dijon Johnson. Those guys are going to rotate in a lot this year as well. And going back along the offense side of the ball, at wide receiver, 3 names to look out for that are true freshmen. Aiden Mizell, Eugene Wilson III, and Andy Jean. Those 3 guys, you can see a lot of guys playing a lot this year. So I've named a lot of freshmen. They're going to play some young guys, but this is a team that they're young, but they're very, very talented. But, hey, there's going to be some growing pains this year. But I'm looking also at guys like Caleb Douglas and Marcus Burkle on the wide receiver position. We know what we have with Ricky Pearsall. Ricky Pearsall is the best receiver on the team. We'll just put that out there. He is. So it's a deep group at wide receiver, and it's a much different team that is, like I mentioned, more depth, more quality, and these guys are hungry. I mean, they're coming in with the chip on their shoulder. I mean, nobody's really expecting them to win a whole lot of games. They've heard it all summer long. So they're going to come in with a chip on their shoulder. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do when they get out there.
It's a really good overall breakdown, but I am curious. Can you shed a little bit more light on the new quarterback, Graham Mertz? Where does he excel and where does he maybe struggle? And overall, do you feel like the coaching staff made the right call with him?
Well, he excels actually in an area where Anthony Richardson last year struggled, the short intermediate throws and hitting checkdowns. That's something that you're going to see a lot of this year because he has the ability to do that. If the big play is not there, he scans the field. He'll hit the check down if he needs to hit the check down. Instead of trying to get it all in one play, he'll take the little 4 to 7 yard route and move the ball down the field. Where I would say he struggles, I would say more so he doesn't have a huge arm. He has a decent arm, so he doesn't throw a whole lot of deep ball, make a whole lot of deep ball passes. But I wouldn't say it's more of a struggle. It's more he just doesn't do it a whole lot. At Wisconsin, they didn't really ask him to do it a whole lot. I think he has the ability to do it, but we have to see it. We haven't really much seen it. So I feel like they did make the right choice at quarterback. When he came in, they pretty much said immediately he was one of the guys that was in the facility. He pretty much lived there, and they pretty much had to tell him to get out of the facility because he's in there so much. He picked up the playbook quickly, and he immediately became a leader on this team. He gained the respect of his teammates, and he not only leads by example, but he's a vocal leader as well. So he's one of those guys that can rally the team, and they're going to get behind him. So as I said, one thing I want to see him improve more on is the deep ball passes. I want to see more downfield shots. So hopefully hopefully Billy Napier can get some of those plays in there for him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that that sort of mentality is really what you're looking for in a quarterback, a guy that's going to come in. Sorry, guys, my Wi-Fi keeps going out. That's going to come in. That's going to demand, the respect of his teammates, and who's going to put in the work. Um, Going back to kind of Coach Napier, is there a certain position group that you think is keeping him up at night right now that he's really maybe concerned about on Utah's side of the football going into Thursday's game?
If there was a position group I could name, I would probably say really the offensive and defensive lines, because as we mentioned before, we know how physical Utah is, especially along the trenches. They have guys that are some of these a good amount of these guys are going to be NFL players. I'm just going to put it out there. Good amount of these guys are going to be NFL players, and we know how good of an offensive line they have. So that's something that I know he's looking at, trying to find ways to kind of penetrate the offensive line with some of the players on defense, trying to stop the run and get pressure on the quarterback. So whoever's playing quarterback, I saw the depth chart. So whoever's out there, I think he's going to find a way to try and get pressure on them. And, also along the defensive line, Utah's defensive line is really, really good. And so I feel like there's probably going to be some plays where he designs where he tries to get the ball out of Graham Mertz's hands quickly, because looking at Utah, looking at what they did last season, they are going to bring some pressure. So it's going to be up to the offensive line to hold up, and also up to Graham Mertz to get the ball out of his hands as quick as possible if they bring that pressure.
I'd certainly have to agree with you. Last year it felt like Florida's offensive and defensive lines were the ones getting work done, but I think that this year Utah might have that edge in terms of who's going to control the trenches. It'll be an interesting battle for sure. What are your maybe 3 keys to a Florida victory on Thursday?
I would say, how the offensive and defensive lines hold up, especially along the offensive line, because I feel like if they're able to generate a push up front and we are able to get the running game going, we're going to be able to milk the clock and get some of those chunk yards, 5, 6, 7 yard gains. Also, I mentioned before, downfield passes. If Florida is able to use their receivers to get them down the field more, because they have a lot of guys that have some speed. If they're able to take the top off the defense and get some downfield throws down there, I feel like that's going to be an area where Florida can win the game and kind of keep Utah on their heels. Now, also on the defensive side of the ball, an area I'm looking at is get the edge rusher. We have a new defense coordinator in Austin Armstrong, who came over from Southern Miss. He was at Southern Miss as their defense coordinator. Then he went to Alabama to be the inside linebackers coach. And then Billy Napier hired him to be the defense coordinator. So I feel like if Austin Armstrong is able to dial up some pressure and get to the quarterback, I feel like that's really going to be the key area right there where Florida can win the game.
Those keys that you say are interesting, because they kind of directly align with some of the keys that Utah fans have been talking about. Areas that certainly are going to determine the outcome of the game. So it'll be interesting to see which team wins out and is able to fully accomplish those. Just my last kind of question here for you. Interested to see, what's your prediction for this game? What's maybe your final score, and who's coming out on top?
This is a tough one. It's been going back and forth. Just looking at both teams, I think this is going to be a very physical game. I think it's going to be pretty much along the lines of what we saw last year in terms of score. I would say, even though Utah is favored and they should be, they're the 2-time defending Pac-12 champions for a reason. And by the way, everybody that covers the Pac-12 or on all these networks, please stop disrespecting Utah and acting like that they're not just the 2-time defending Pac-12 champions, because they are for a reason. But first game, it's going to be a very tough environment, hostile environment. I'm going to go Florida in a very close game. I'm going to say 28-24. I think this is going to be one of those games where, like, it's low scoring at first. Then you're going to kind of see both teams get everything going. And then I think how Florida wins the game is going to be maybe similar to last year, where defensively they get a stop. So I think defensively, if we can just improve in some of those areas that I mentioned, I think that's where Florida wins this game. But it's going to be very, very close.
I agree with you. Similar to last year, I think this game is decided by one possession, somewhere in that high 20, low 30 range. Got to go with Utah. Just being at home, they don't lose in Rice-Eccles Stadium very often. It's been multiple seasons since they've lost. The amount of solid players that they're returning this season, the leadership that they have, and I think just the change to Florida's defense. I think Florida's offense. I think Utah's defense is going to be able to stop Florida this year. So I think it's going to be close. I wouldn't be surprised if it does go either way, but I think Utah is going to defend that home field advantage and come out with a dub in this first one. Anthony, thank you so much. This was fantastic to get your insights. Again, that's Anthony from the Swamp, Inside Florida Athletics. We thank you for coming on. Fans can follow him at AceWade1 on Twitter. Anthony, where can they find your other work and coverage for Florida?
Well, you can follow our podcast page on Twitter at Inside_Swamp and on Instagram at Inside_Florida Athletics. We're also, unfortunately, on TikTok, and I do mean unfortunately, but we're on TikTok at Inside Swamp 1. And me also personally, you can follow me on the Roll Up Network as well, as I'm going to be covering Florida as a staff writer and content creator on there as well. So follow rollupnetwork.com on Twitter at rollup_network. All
right, Anthony, thanks again. We appreciate you. It'll be an interesting matchup here on Thursday. We certainly look forward to what Thursday brings.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it, and I appreciate you for having me on the show tonight.
Thanks, Anthony.